Good afternoon,
All
Mark.
right.
Thank you again for offering to do this interview here with
Yeah.
today. What I want to do is, given your background, which you can explain in a moment, provide an introduction for both of us to new and returning student athletes
Yeah.
and how you and I complement each other as far as sports performance, training, and the like. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Segue, I said your background. Why don't you take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I am a Transy grad. I graduated in 2004, which it doesn't feel so long ago, but I guess it was. I was born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky. And then after I went to Transy, which I got a undergrad degree in exercise science and a minor in psychology. And I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach like yourself. And then I went on to grad school in Florida and I earned a master's degree in exercise physiology. But around that time, I got into endurance sports. I come from a swimming background. I swam through high school and I swam through college at Transy and then dabbled in cross country running my senior year. And then when I was in graduate school, I got into endurance sports. So I started to do marathon running and triathlons and the Ironman distance, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a 26.2 mile run at the end. And as I started to get into these endurance events, I realized how important nutrition was. And so I went back to school again and became a registered dietitian and then went on to become board certified in sports nutrition. So my background is in exercise science and exercise physiology, but also in sports nutrition. And now I own my own business and I work with athletes on nutrition. I also coach triathletes as well. I am a triathlete, and I have been since 2006 competitively. And I still love swimming. I enjoy biking. I enjoy running. I enjoy living an active lifestyle, but I know how important nutrition is in order to stay healthy and to optimize performance. And I really enjoy helping other athletes get the most out of their body to achieve athletic excellence through good nutrition and nutrient timing.
So you're still competing?
Yep, still competing. Well, obviously, this year is a little bit different with everything going on, but I do still race at a very high level of triathlon. And it takes me to different places in the United States and around the world. So I really enjoy it. I'm not a professional, but I enjoy racing as an elite triathlete, endurance triathlete. And I love the training. So I still am, even today at 38 years old, I'm still very competitive and still live as an athlete.
How many days a week do you train? Now, I mean, obviously, I'm guessing it's cyclical,
Every
like
day. Yeah, every day, at least once to twice a day, depending on, because we have three sports to train for. So depending on
Mhm.
what's on my schedule. But like this morning, I did a bike workout followed by a run right afterwards. Yesterday, I did a swim in the morning and strength training in the afternoon. So there's usually two workouts a day.
So what competition are you currently preparing for?
Well, nothing's on the schedule, so just training for life right now. But
Okay.
yeah, but I would have been finishing my season right about now with already have completed 5 or 6 endurance events. So we'll just wait until next year.
Okay. All right. So now, so how do you train for life right now, but maintain, like you said, a strength workout? So are you in, say, a maintenance phase so that as soon as the restrictions are lifted a little bit more, you'll pick right up in a 2 to 3 week cycle, or what?
Exactly. Just maintaining
Okay.
fitness right now. No need to, don't want to burn ourselves out. So whenever there's a race on the schedule, we'll start peaking again.
That sounds kind of fun, maybe. I always
Yeah.
thought maybe when I got older, I would do triathlons, but the older I get, the more things hurt. And I'm like, I don't know about that anymore. So,
Yeah.
well, again, thank you.
Yeah.
So many athletes, want to do work on the field, court, pool, and in the gym. And if they don't focus on good nutrition, they can experience not only performance setbacks and issues, but just like you said, training for life, they can, have some issues. What are some of the biggest nutrition struggles that you have dealt with, or noticed in student athletes, or maybe even clients that, our student athletes would benefit hearing about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, there's different categories, and I don't think that the one athlete fits into every category. Everybody is different. Um, I want to say that all student athletes are very motivated and driven, especially athletes at Transy, right? They come to Transy with very high academic goals, but also athletic goals as well. And because of the athletic demands with training and competition and games, and then the academic pressures as well, and then also new life responsibilities, especially for the freshman and sophomore, it's not uncommon for athletes to experience great burnout and stress, anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, injury, and illness. And so these are things that we have to consider when student athletes are coming to campus and wanting to get the most out of themselves academically and athletically. And a lot of athletes, they don't take advantage of the nutrition services that are available, or many colleges don't have the nutrition services as well, or universities. And so we want to make sure that we have these smart nutrition practices in order to improve sport performance and body composition and health. Now, I do have to mention too that a lot of student athletes engage in some risky behaviors, such as using alcohol or drugs. And sometimes athletes do this as a way to fit in, maybe suppress uncomfortable or stressful emotions, or for the pleasure aspect to make themselves feel better. But student athletes who are serious about performance and their health, they need to learn how to avoid this temptation to do drugs and alcohol. Now, another thing is that it's not uncommon for a lot of student athletes to just kind of plow through the day in a very sleep deprived state. So, poor or restless sleep can increase the appetite. It can intensify cravings, especially for sugary and fatty foods. And it can also increase the reliance on energy drinks, which are not safe or healthy. And it's just that temporary chemical boost. So, poor sleep, stress, unhealthy eating, drugs and alcohol, all of this can affect weight. It can break down the immune system. It can decrease motivation and energy levels and compromise health. Now, I can't ignore the fact that a lot of athletes are at risk for an eating disorder. And it usually starts as dieting in order to improve performance or to lose a few pounds or to change body composition. But dieting typically uh, goes into disordered eating, and disordered eating often goes into an eating disorder. Athletes have very high expectations for themselves and the perfectionist mindset and feel great pressure to succeed. And these are all qualities that make athletes great. But at the same time, when your sport emphasizes leanness, or you have tight or revealing clothing, or your coach is, putting pressure on you, all of this can exacerbate and lead to some unhealthy habits. So that's a lot of different things, but these are the most common kind of bullet points, these areas that I think a lot of athletes struggle with. And each one of those categories has a nutrition component where nutrition can be have a positive impact or a negative impact.
Okay, you just said a whole lot without, I think, even taking in one breath. I don't know how you got through all that. So you mentioned a few things that I do want to ask about. So you had said something about dieting, and the way you said that, it sounded like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if a student athlete says, "Well, I need to diet," then it basically chases this, and then that follows, and the next thing you know, we're into disordered eating. Mm-hmm. Is that what you were saying? As far as that goes, that can be a rabbit hole they'll follow themselves down?
Yeah, it's very typical, and research shows that most Eating disorders start off as just innocent dieting.
Hmm.
And that's because dieting is typically control and restriction and elimination. And then it often gets more extreme and disordered eating habits occur. And then that's where that eating disorder, which is more clinically based, occurs.
And another thing that you'd said, and not to skip over that, but we'll come back to that.
Yep.
Another thing you had said is that without a lack of sleep, and I've always told the athletes, one, you can't out-train poor nutrition.
No.
And, staying up all night and cramming may get you ready for a test, but it's going to put you back as far as your training week.
Mm-hmm.
Tired one day, and you may not get your sleep back, and then you're going to be tired another day, so on and so forth. But one thing I wanted to touch base on was, and I've heard this, that if you are craving chips, for example, or pretzels that's salty, or if you're craving, candy, that possibly, and I'm not saying that those are good foods or anything you want to crave, but basically what it is, it's your body saying, hey, we are tired. We are missing this ingredient. We may need salt. We may need carbohydrates because we're tired. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that your body is really good at telling you what it needs. But a lot of times we're not very good at listening to our body. Sometimes we're really thirsty and we eat instead, or we learn how to ignore our hunger signals. And we try to mask things like poor sleep with coffee or energy drinks. Right. And so a lot of these is, it's really hard to know what your body needs. But I will say that when you're in a sleep deprived state, which a lot of student athletes tend to be in, I know I was when I was, in school. But when you're constantly and chronically in this sleep deprived state, you don't make good choices. And that can be, skills in sport. It could be food choices in the academics as well. So sleep is just so important.
Okay. So let's move into a little bit of the student athlete planning as far as nutrition for, say, sports season. So how would you guide an athlete who is training during an off season with higher volume workouts, say high volume in the weight room, we're doing more conditioning workouts, versus an athlete who would be competing during the in season with higher intensity work? So, if we're going to get in the weight room during our in season, we're not going to do a lot of high volume lifting. We're going to hit some high percentages for fewer reps. But at the same time, practices, game schedule, that is higher in capacity or as you were in volume. So that in-season scheduling is difficult. How would you tell an athlete or guide an athlete nutritionally, the off-season versus in-season? High volume, low volume, but high intensity.
Yeah, this is a great point. So I think the first thing to keep in mind is kind of the importance of nutrition all year long. And when you supply your body with the right nutrients at the right time, you have better energy, better mood, better health, better recovery, better performance, right? So nutrition is so important. We cannot deny that. Your diet or what you eat also reduces your risk for illness and injury and burnout. And that's really important, especially during peak season as well.
Right.
As an athlete, when your energy increases, so as you build throughout your season, whatever it may look like, and this is more for the endurance, power, strength, speed sports, not so much the skill sports, perhaps like golf, but more of the anaerobic or aerobic sports, that as your energy increases, your energy needs also increase. And the food that you eat fuels that activity. So there are going to be deviations throughout the year in terms of how you eat. And when you increase the intensity and volume of your workouts, your body is then challenged to keep up with these energy demands, and it gets quite difficult. And so we need a solid foundation in place something to work from. And the same thing applies to strength training, right? We wouldn't just ignore the preseason and say, okay, it's peak season, so we're just gonna, heavy weights and power and explosiveness, right? We need to get those tissues adapted to it, and we need to kind of prime the body first. And the same is true with nutrition. So let's think about competition season, because I think it's easy for athletes to identify that you need to recover quickly, you need to maintain your energy levels. That's so important. So the food choices are really there to delay fatigue, to aid in recovery, to optimize hydration. It's all about performance. And the diet's going to look a little bit different. It may not always look healthy, but it's there for performance. And if somebody wants to change their body composition, for whether it's to gain muscle or to lose body fat, now or that time in competition season, it's not the time, because you're really focusing on fueling your body. So the off season, or maybe even in the preseason, is when you can afford to manipulate the diet a little bit, where it's not going to affect health and performance. So really, if athletes want to improve their performance through nutrition, it starts in the off season and the preseason. And I know that it's hard, because the off season athletes just kind of want to check out sometimes. And, maybe it's the summer and you're not as dedicated to sport or fitness, but really it's the off season where you want to start building that foundation. What does healthy eating look like for you? How can you start building some of these good nutrition habits of making good choices, prepping food, learning what your body needs, so that you can get ready for preseason and then competition season? So it's really important that athletes understand that, just like there's phases throughout the year and a periodized approach with training, and you work on different things to maximize your performance, we want to do the same thing with nutrition. So we never want to neglect nutrition. And if you want to maximize your performance, you need to make sure that you have a good starting place to work from.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit more. So whenever I tell athletes about their RMR, resting metabolic rate, and I show them the equation and say, if you just sat all day, woke up and sat all day, this is how many calories your body needs. They're astounded at the number for just eating to just sit,
To live.
breathe, for the organs to work, just to breathe, and just to just sit.
Yeah.
And I tell them, they could double that, and that should be their daily caloric intake. Now, I know it's not just as simple as doubling that, but when I show an athlete that 2,500 calories should be their goal for the day, and they look at me and say, I can't eat that much, then what do you say? Then how do you, and I know you can, I don't want to say force, but I can train the body to, and in the military, I ate everything. So I know my stomach grew, but I didn't get any bigger because we were burning it just like that. And I try and tell athletes that, but why don't you tell us a little bit about how to, I don't want to say convince, but how to teach an athlete that you will see caloric numbers that are higher than you are ever used to ever seeing or even believing you could eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would like athletes to think of the perspective of, I need to make sure I'm eating enough. And in our diet focused world, a lot of athletes are worried about eating too much. So it is important to understand, what does your body need to just thrive on a daily basis, and to reduce risk for illness and disease, and to maintain a healthy body composition. And I know we're talking a lot about making, some athletes do want to lose weight, and some athletes can lose weight for health reasons. Some athletes need to gain weight for health reasons. So I don't want to categorize certain athletes, but I do think that it's really important that everybody understands what their body needs. But in order to really use that number, we have to have good habits in place. How are you going to get these foods? how do you plan those throughout the day? How do you time those foods with your workout? So it does get a little bit complicated. And that's why a lot of athletes can benefit by working with a sports dietitian to help kind of take away some of that guesswork, so that all the athlete needs to do, besides working on those habits, they can really dedicate more of their energy to the sport and education, as opposed to trying to figure out everything on their own.
Well, we thank you for being here for us.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about why nutrition, like you just said, and this is a perfect segue. You just said they need to really allow someone like yourself to guide them so they can focus on training and education. So why is nutrition so confusing?
Yeah, it is confusing, right? I mean, even for experts, we read something one day and it's completely different the next day. We all can agree that within sports success, that diet is a huge piece of the puzzle. But a lot of athletes just don't appreciate it, or just don't know how to master it, right? I know when I was swimming at Transy, I mean, my nutrition was not great. I didn't know what I was doing back then. If only I knew now and applied it back then, I think I could have been so much healthier and also performed so much better as well. But a performance focused diet, we don't want it to be confusing, and we don't want it to be overwhelming. It should not be meticulous. It should not be complicated. We need to make it work for each athlete, and it's going to look different for every athlete. And there's a lot of strong opinions on nutrition coming from the media and influencers and professional athletes and celebrities. And with that comes a lot of misinformation. And it's so easy to fall victim to a lot of these extreme or rigid styles of eating, or just these unhealthy food lists and food rules. But I just want to stress that every athlete responds differently to food. We all come from a different genetic makeup, and everybody has unique needs. And not every human body, is going to look the same. That there's no one ideal body or for your sport, and there's no one size fits all diet plan as well. And that can be confusing for a lot of people, because they want to just say, I follow this and then I should get results. But it just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And then also, nutrition is so confusing because, as we talked about, as your training changes, your nutrition has to change.
Right.
And so if you don't know how to change it, you don't know, when should I be eating more carbohydrates? When should I be eating more fruits and vegetables? If you don't know these things, then and you're told to do that, that could be very overwhelming because you don't have those habits in place. But we really need to make sure it really starts with just creating a healthy foundation of eating, understanding what your body needs to just thrive and survive, and then building from that so you can maximize performance.
Okay. Well, okay. Because I'm with you. I think about how to help plan for these athletes. And there are so many changes that it gets overwhelming for even me. So I can only imagine how it would feel for an athlete.
Yeah.
And we spoke about this, but how do you feel? How do you react? What do you tell athletes when they tell you, hey, I've looked into intermittent fasting. Hey, I like the keto diet. Hey, I'm doing Atkins because my dad is. What information, how would you guide a student athlete who comes to you and says, I'm doing this because?
Yeah. Well, I mean, nutrition is an important puzzle piece of athletic performance, and athletes do need to be more mindful and dedicated to nutrition, much more so than the sedentary population. This doesn't mean obsessed, but as athletes, and I'll put myself in that category, we just have to be more aware of what we put into our body on a day-to-day basis. But pursuing a diet that is restrictive in nature, keto, veganism, intermittent fasting, if an athlete is pursuing this with the mindset that if I do this, I will perform better or I will lose weight, that is not a healthy approach, because restriction doesn't make you stronger. Restriction doesn't make you more powerful. Restriction doesn't make you faster as an athlete. We need to fuel that engine that you're trying to strengthen to be as healthy and as strong as can be. Also, if you have body dissatisfaction, so you don't like the way that you look, seeking a restrictive diet is going to increase the risk of an eating disorder, just because you're chasing something that the diet is not going to fix, and it will just get more extreme and more extreme. And when eating habits do become extreme or restrictive, that's when a decline in health and performance occurs. And so if we're trying to change our diet to become a better athlete, removing healthy foods or restricting calories in an excessive way, it goes against our primary goal of trying to be a better athlete. And it often starts out as an innocent way, right? I just want to lose a few pounds. I just want to, if I can eat better, I'll be healthier and then I'll perform better. But athletes are perfectionists. Athletes are very driven. Athletes are very determined. And so it may start innocently, but even if you try to incorporate some of these strategies from some of these restrictive diets, it doesn't, it rarely leads into performance benefits or improved health. Sometimes there are short-term results that are positive, and this may cause an athlete or a coach to believe that this style of eating is helpful, but that is short-lived. Most of the time, when it's very short-term, the body kind of struggles to maintain this restrictive style of eating, and that's where hormones get affected, metabolism gets affected, mentally the brain is affected. So most athletes, I mean, if any athlete is seeking to change the diet for performance, health, or body composition reasons, or even ethical reasons or religious reasons, or just medical reasons, if you need to change your diet, work with a professional like a board certified sports dietitian to help you navigate through the overwhelming amount of diet trends so that you have a safe, a sustainable, and realistic approach that promotes optimal health and performance and doesn't compromise your health and performance.
So continuing along that line, what would be, and this is kind of a two-part question here, what would you say might be some red flags or some warning signs? So if I just said, you know what, I'm going to cut back on carbs, I don't know that I would be the best choice to do depending on my sport, but any sport actually. But let's say that they just said that. And what would be some red flags that, one, a strength coach who's going to see them many days a week, or the sport coach who's going to see them many days a week, or some red flags they might know on their own, like, I'm dizzy, I'm out of energy. So let me ask that question first, and then how would someone approach you, or vice versa, with questions on health issues associated with a disorder? How can an athlete identify a disorder within themselves? So that one those two questions I think should piggyback off of each of them. But did that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yeah. And I don't want athletes to feel like that everybody is focused on losing weight. A lot of athletes are doing this with the right reasons of the joy and the passion for sport, and it makes you feel good and wanting to get the most out of your body. But it is true, and we cannot overlook the fact that many athletes and many coaches do believe, and they have the mindset, that a lower body weight is critical for athletic success. It's kind of just part of the athletic mind. People compliment people when they're leaner and associate that with performance ready or
good shape, can handle
right.
whatever.
Yeah. And then to make matters worse, a lot of coaches, and I'm not saying that this applies to coaches at Transy, but a lot of coaches out there have applauded athletes that when they can reduce body fat levels to very low levels, they are happy. They think that they're dedicated and they're committed and they're rewarded with praise. And so this kind of can get into the mind of an athlete. Well, the coach likes me better when I'm leaner, or I get more
Mhm.
compliments when I weigh less. And that's something we have to be careful of. There's also a lot of comments made by other athletes and coaches, body shaming, attributing poor performance on weight. Hey, if you lost a few pounds, you would be a better athlete, or regular weigh ins, which is something I am not a proponent of. All of these can intensify body image concerns. um, our culture places such great emphasis on how the athlete body should look. And so a lot of athletes do feel this pressure to be more defined, to change the way that the body looks for this perfect physique. Um, Additionally, athletes have this kind of socially acceptable setting that they can justify their eating habits. Oh, I need to eat healthy because I have a competition coming up. And, who's going to say, no, you don't need to? It's like, oh, yeah, you're a dedicated athlete. So it's kind of like athletes can get away with it as well. Some of these disordered eating habits, these strict eating habits. So an obsessive focus on weight can lead to unhealthy weight loss practices. And so some of the things that athletes may do, besides just starvation and diet pills and skipping meals, it could be just refusing to eat certain foods. Like I'm not eating sugar right now, or eliminating food groups. Like I'm not eating dairy, or I'm not eating carbohydrates or bread. Preoccupation with calories. How many calories is that? Because I can only eat 1,500 calories today. Um, Frequent mirror checking, just looking and analyzing the body, like, oh, I have this fat under my arm and I need to lose that so I can, be a better tennis player. Um, Menstrual irregularities in women, so missing the menstrual cycle, and just plain old dieting. All of these come with long-term health consequences, and so some of these short or long-term consequences that we see, lightheadedness, fainting, dizziness, and all of this can be because of dehydration or blood pressure issues or blood sugar issues, sleeping issues. So, the brain needs carbohydrates in order to sleep, because that's how your brain functions while you're sleeping. And so if you're not getting adequate carbohydrates, you're going to have very restless sleep. Um, Also, we have uh, uh, more risk for stress fractures, fatigue. There's a lot of things that this rigid or extreme style of eating can cause. Further down the line, we can get nutrient deficiencies like anemia. Um, Fatigue, as I talked about, reduced heart functioning, so the heart doesn't function as well. Chronic illness, getting sick all the time, low motivation. All of this can occur when the body isn't getting the nutrients that it needs.
Okay, that's a lot. It's a lot. That's a lot to take in, and especially if you are an athlete and you are trying to perform at a high level and you're
Right.
doing student work, that is a lot. So, what's involved with a nutrition consultation? So, if an athlete comes to me and says, "Hey, Zach, I want to lose a few pounds. I want to perform better. Um, I do need to lose a few pounds in order to perform better." Or, hey, I'm performing better, but I've lost 5 pounds. Is this something that I need to be concerned with? How does it work? One, virtually, given that we're in the middle of the COVID
Right.
situation, and how would it work in person?
Yeah. Well, I think that any athlete who wants to improve their nutrition, um, that is a great thing. And nobody should be afraid to reach out to somebody for, nutrition help, mental health help, um, for academic help, right? Reaching out for help is a sign of a strength that you want to better yourself. And there's also nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. We want to do it in a healthy way. There's nothing wrong with wanting to put on muscle. There are we can rationalize everything. We just need to make sure it comes from a good place and the approaches are done in a safe and healthy way. And so that's where I can step in to help people. Typically, how it works, and luckily, these days we can do everything virtual. I do prefer to sit down one-on-one with people, as we all do, but we can still accomplish a lot virtually on the phone, Skype, FaceTime, whatever it may be in this platform as well. So first, I want to get to know the athlete as not only as an athlete, but a human being. So I first send a nutrition questionnaire just to get to know this person and a little bit more about them. And then I want to see a typical day or two of eating. And that's really important to me, to just see what's normal. And there's no judgment here. There's no assumptions. You don't go to the doctor when you feel well. You go to the doctor when you need help, because something's wrong. So same thing with nutrition. If somebody is struggling with their nutrition, I want to see what those struggles are. I don't want to see this perfect style of eating. And then over time, we work on small changes, and it's a dialogue. It's not me dictating to an athlete, you need to do this and you'll get results. I want to know from the athlete what's important to them, because I want to treat them as a human being and what's important to them, their culture, their background, their finances, their sport, their food likes and dislikes, or allergies and tolerances. It's really important to consider all of this when figuring out what's the best place to start and where can we make some changes. I don't believe in rigid or extreme styles of eating, and I never want an athlete to feel like nutrition is taking over their life. So I don't want an athlete to feel like, oh, I can't eat ice cream, or I can't go out to a pub with my friends, or I can't have a burger with French fries. Though we need to see how nutrition changes can be incorporated into a balanced life. You don't want to feel socially isolated as well. But we want to focus on short-term and long-term changes. So the nutrition strategies that we work on are not only beneficial for life at Transy, but also onward as well, so that they can take these good nutrition habits and we want to see them as lifestyle changes, that they can take them as they become adults and have a family or career, whatever it may be. So I always focus on lifestyle skills and habits, and that's what we work on, whether you're in the dorm room, an apartment, or living with your parents. What are some practical changes that we can make in order to have positive outcomes? And yeah, it's going to feel a little overwhelming at first, just like anything, right? Arriving to college as a freshman, or starting a new strength training program. Of course, it's going to feel a little overwhelming and a little uncomfortable to make changes, but I want to make the nutrition journey as smooth as possible and not feel like, oh my gosh, tomorrow I start something new and it's going to take over my life. We just make very small changes, and then we do some check-ins every week, every 2 weeks, so that the athlete has some accountability to report back how things are going, but also understanding that not everything needs to be changed in 1 week or overnight.
So cheat days are okay.
Yeah, and we don't want to call them cheat days, because we're not having to what you're saying is, yes, we can have those foods that a lot of people think, well, when I'm eating healthy, these foods are off limit, right? We want to create a diet where foods are rich in nutrient density are prioritized. When we're in peak training, that foods with energy density are prioritized. But then we also have room for foods that don't serve as nutrient dense or as energy dense, but are just served as pleasure, because we want to indulge, but we want to do it in a responsible way. And we know how to do that so it doesn't affect our performance or our health.
Okay. Well, Marni, I certainly appreciate it. I really do. I appreciate you taking the time. And if I didn't say this before, the athletes are going to be able to reach out to you either directly or through me.
Yes.
So how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, I know things are a little bit different this year because I can't be on campus yet, but I hope one day I can be on campus. So for now, if any athlete does want to reach out to me for some nutrition help, I would ask that they reach out to their coach, and then the coach can pass along my email to the athlete, just so that the coach is in the loop with everything. And
Perfect.
so if an athlete comes to you and wants some nutrition help, then you can go to the coach, talk to the coach, and then between one of you all, you can reach out to me and we can get the conversation started. So I would really want to make sure that the coach is always involved in understanding that this athlete is working with me and that we have a team approach to really make sure that everybody's on board and that the athlete's health and performance is always number one.
Perfect. Too easy. That is too easy. Now, I'm not going to ask you to self-advertise. I will bring it up. I won't ask you to, pat yourself on the back, but you've got a couple of books, right?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
great.
Well, we figured you strategically sat so that I'd have to say something, but so tell us about those a little
Proud of
bit.
those. Yeah, I have 3 books. My first one is Essential Sports Nutrition, which a lot of the coaches at Transy do have.
Okay.
So that was my first book, and all on sports nutrition and recipes and nutrient timing for athletes. I have a running journal. So if fitness enthusiasts or those that want to keep track of their exercise routine, that might come in handy. It has quotes and motivation and tips. And then my latest book is Athlete to Triathlete for the individuals who maybe come from an athletic background and are interested in becoming a 3-sport athlete, maybe a little bit tri-curious. So that book has some strength training and really all the nitty-gritty details on the sport of triathlon.
Perfect. Now, in that first book, you said, if I'm a football player, is that going to have something beneficial for me in there? I mean, it's not just for triathlon or distance training, it's for athletes.
Yeah, so this book has everything from endurance sports to power to skill to speed. I really made sure to cater to every type of athlete and every type of dietary pattern. So if somebody is a vegetarian or somebody is lactose intolerant, they're still going to be able to apply the information in this book and still get the most out of it.
Perfect. Well, I don't have anything else. Like I said, thank you for taking some time with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to working with everybody. I am on social media. I do think it's always helpful to kind of get to know somebody and what they believe in and their philosophy and kind of how they're living life. So the athletes can follow me, Try Marni Coaching and Nutrition on Facebook and Try Marni on Instagram. Those are kind of my 2 platforms. I also blog, trymarni.blogspot.com. So all of those, just to find out my website, trymarnicoach.com, just to learn a little bit more about me, to feel comfortable with me and what I believe in.
Well, I did start following you the other day.
Well, thank you. I try to follow most of the team.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm gonna have to have you to follow me so everybody can get and connect with each other. So, well, thanks again. And I hope that we do have athletes reaching out to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. And I look forward to working with everyone.
Perfect. Sounds great. We'll see you.
Bye.